If you are hearing this broadcast, seek shelter immediately.
What is it? What's going on?
If you are hearing this broadcast, seek shelter
John, go!
immediately. Seek shelter immediately.
Hang on, Nathan.
Seek shelter immediately. Seek shelter immediately.
See, what we've got to consider is that we are looking at objects which might be a mile wide that are coming into the atmosphere at 70,000 miles an hour, and they are hot. You know, some people will remember Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 that hit Jupiter back in 1994. That was a small comet, just 2 kilometers wide, broke into about 20 fragments. The explosive power of those impacts on Jupiter was 300 gigatons. Now let me put that into perspective. The entire world's nuclear arsenal, were it to go off at once, would be 6.4 gigatons. So you're looking at something beyond imagination. The power of these impacts is absolutely colossal. Numbers don't do it. Just imagine a world on fire.
What's up? An alien. What is that actually?
The pain of death. I mean, you feel the danger. It's never what you think it's going to be. It always comes up in another way. It's like sloppy sometimes, and battle is often just confusion, breaking down. Things don't work. It's like Mike Tyson said, you know, your plan goes out the window and you get hit in the face. That's the way it goes. When you get into a jungle situation, you're close to people. You don't really know where you're shooting sometimes. You don't know where the incoming fire is coming from. So it's quite a mess. It's chaotic. The radio, people screaming, shouting, noise, confusion, and a lot of fear.
First off, there are the impacts 12,800 years of this cataclysm, centered on North America, but global, and global temperature plummet. People who talk about global warming or today, what change in temperature 12,800 years ago is just temperatures plunge at the beginning, massive animal extinctions, and then 1,200 years later, equally suddenly, temperatures shoot up again. Dramatic. And there's another series of floods. So the period is 12,800 to 11,600 years ago. I don't know if Randall agrees, we're sure that the comet was the cause of the first event 12,800 years ago. I think other bits of the comet were responsible for the second event as well. I think there was an impact in ocean which threw water vapor up into the upper atmosphere, caused a greenhouse effect, and created that sudden spike in warming and that huge flood.
Mars entered Aries, I don't know, 12 hours ago. We're here June 28th. But that's, you know, just at the end of June. And Mars being in Aries is not only tremendously important for understanding July, it's tremendously important for understanding the whole second half of the year. And when we pair Mars's ingress with Saturn's regress into Capricorn, we have a pair of factors that really tell us a whole lot about the second half of 2020, because Mars is going to be in Aries for the second half of 2020, and Saturn will be in Capricorn until the last 2 weeks of the year.
One of the things we focused on was how Mars ingressing into Capricorn and then eventually forming the exact conjunction with first Pluto in Capricorn, then Mars conjoining Jupiter in Capricorn, and then eventually Mars catching up to Saturn at the end of Capricorn and early Aquarius. was in March and early April and happened to line up pretty nicely with the lockdowns in the US and the shooting up of the coronavirus tests and people being diagnosed with it, as well as people dying from it. That's one of the things that's coming back starting in July as well, is Mars moving into Aries, as you said at the beginning of this segment, Austin, reactivates that because now suddenly Mars is in another cardinal sign, and it's going to start making hard aspects with those same planets once again, which sort of recapitulates or brings us back to some of those energies of the March-April timeframe. Now, that doesn't fully start to hit actually until August and September, because that's when the exact aspects between Mars and Pluto and Jupiter and Saturn actually go exact. But we're basically in the build-up phase at this point as of the very end of June, when Mars moved into Aries.
So imagine 15, maybe 20% are dying. Weather problems, logistical problems.
Now, a huge number of Americans are struggling, many of them for the first time. If you look at the new jobs report, it appears the economy is on the right track. For the month of June, we saw the economy add nearly 5 million jobs. That's after adding nearly 3 million in May. But remember, we lost more than 22 million jobs in March and April. That means we've only recovered about 1 in 3 of those lost jobs. And as bad as things have been, they may be on the verge of getting worse. Those enhanced unemployment benefits from the government run out at the end of this month. Rents and mortgages that have been put off are going to come due.
All that would be bad enough if we were beating this virus, and a month ago it looked like we were, but all those gains now seem to have been reversed. Cases are up, hospitalizations are up, and more states are clamping down on their reopenings.
Was the stimulus part of this, and we need that stimulus to continue to make sure things don't get cemented where they are at the moment. It was an unprecedentedly fast spike into recession, from 3.5% unemployment to close to 15% in the space of 2 or 3 months. That was matched by unprecedented both government, fiscal and central bank monetary support on the flip side, and in the short term that's just about papering over the cracks. But if we don't see it extended or the economy continue to bounce back quickly, we could be in a much worse situation. The severity of it isn't really sustainable for more than a couple of quarters.
I remember at the start of this year doing on my global video that this was going to be the year that most of us would rather not deal with. This was going to be a stinker of a year. Already that has proven true. Thank you, COVID. However, sorry to say this, but in my astrological opinion, we're not yet at the most difficult time of this year. COVID was a random, well, not a random factor. It's been an accident waiting to happen for a long time, but it's not the worst thing that's coming up. We are heading into the perfect storm.
And in this model that we're describing here, we're not really seeing the genesis of civilization. We're seeing the rebooting of civilization in the aftermath of these events.
We are a species that has amnesia.
You know, with the patriotic stuff and heavily militaristic stuff, it's way off, way off. The lies that were spread by the military, the propaganda that we're winning the whole time. They were using the body counts, heavy body counts. They'd say, well, if we're killing so many of them, there are not going to be that many left. And you could have nuked them. You could have dropped a nuclear bomb. It wouldn't have made the difference. I was dealing in the jungle. You deal with what's right in front of you, fire and the firepower, and it was intense. There was no word for it. Bigger by far than World War II. And Vietnam's coming back.
For people who aren't aware of the whole story behind it, the erosion, the enclosure of the Sphinx,
yes,
where they made the Sphinx, has thousands of years of rainfall erosion. That doesn't make any sense, because the last time there was rain in the Nile Valley was like 9,000 BC.
We are finding the fingerprints of this lost civilization popping up all around the world. Indeed, on any archaeological site where you can be absolutely sure of the dating proves to be much older than we have been taught by archaeologists. They recently discovered a huge megalithic site 40 meters underwater in the Sicily Channel. It's been underwater for the best part of 10,000 years, which means that megalithic site is at least that old and maybe much older, and we can be sure about the dating because it's underwater. Likewise, we can be sure of the dating of Göbekli Tepe because whoever made it deliberately buried it, sealed it, and no later organic material got in to contaminate the carbon dating record and give false lead.
They knew the thing was not going to work. It was cracking.
Somebody went to enormous lengths to create this site. They also, or somebody else, went to enormous lengths to bury it. And actually Göbekli Tepe means pot-bellied hill in the Turkish language. And that whole pot-bellied hill that covers this site was artificially put there by human beings, teams of men and women with buckets filled with rubble and stones, filling it in and covering it up. What we're seeing is just a mass of new evidence that basically vindicates the notion of a lost civilization. Another point is that same date, 11,600 years ago, is the date that Plato gives us for the destruction and submergence by flood of the lost civilization of Atlantis. And up till now, archaeologists have dismissed the whole Atlantis story and they regard it as kind of pseudoscience, although it comes from Plato. But Plato said very clearly that this happened 9,000 years before the time of Solon, and Solon lived in 600 BC, so Plato is telling us Atlantis went down 9,600 BC, 11,600 years ago. Wow. Exactly the date of the second spike of the Younger Dryas cataclysm.
You know, you get a feeling for what's going on. It was not diagnosable. It was not an ailment that you could officially catalog.
So essentially it seems like our Earth went through like 1,000 years of horror.
1,000 years of hell. It's really impossible to imagine what the world was like then for the people who lived in it. And I think it makes sense of why all around the world we have a story of a global flood. This is not something confined to the story of Noah in the Bible. This is a universal story of a cataclysm that changed the world and wiped away a former golden age and left us with the present order of things. all around the world. And secondly, all around the world, and this is intriguing, there is a universal fear of comets. Now, why should we be afraid of comets? We see comets up in the sky, they whiz through, they have this nice tail, they look pretty. Why should we be scared of them? But every culture in the world has myths and traditions that associate comets with disaster. And I think it's pretty obvious why, because this comet impact 12,800 years ago was remembered by the survivors, and they passed that memory down to their children and their children's children, and it's still with us today, and it's now, we know, based on something very real. The scientists who have been diligently working away in this field since they've published their first paper in 2007. I've just brought out a new paper, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, July 2015, where they're doing a statistical analysis of all the sites where the evidence comes from. And what that tells us is that this is what is referred to as an isochrone. This event 12,800 years ago. We're not looking at the effects of 100 or 200 years of events. We're looking at something that happened effectively in a single afternoon across 50 million square kilometers of the Earth's surface.
Ooh, that gives me goosebumps. A single afternoon, all over the world, everything changes forever.
Changes forever.
And it's fucked for 1,000 years.
Absolutely.
The bummer, the downer. The bombing is very sloppy. A lot of inner city people. And at the end of it, they were quiet. And people don't die that way, like, you know.
You have the ice cap north of roughly Minnesota, and south of it you have a heavily vegetated area covered with primal forests. And that's what goes on fire. And the reason it goes on fire is because when these impactors come in, they generate a huge amount of heat, and what is called ejecta, superheated ejecta, is thrown up into the upper atmosphere, and it falls down all over the continent, and it sets the world on fire.
Oh, God.
Now, at the
perspective is so difficult in this.
It's a difficult perspective.
Because there's numbers that you guys are throwing around, and there's concepts that you're throwing around that I have to pause when you're saying, I go, wait a minute. I gotta try to fit this in somewhere, but it's the whole world on fire.
Yeah. Up till now, most of the information has been confined to the really rarefied scientific journals. Very little of it has got out into the public domain. So one of the things I've tried to do is to put this together into a form that's very accessible to the general public, because we all need to know about this. This is our yesterday. This is our background. This is where we come from. The present order of the world has descended from that moment.
The evidence of these woolly mammoths that died instantaneously, and that there are massive fields of them, that something had to happen, and ones really with bad. Like their legs broken, just bent over from the impact. Like it's pretty clear something went down, and all of these pieces point together, and including looking at this, which is just, this is blowing my mind. This idea of the world on fire, just.
These things come in from deep space. There are reservoirs of comets. There's a place that they call the Oort cloud, which is just so far away that it's almost impossible to imagine it. But it contains trillions of comets, and often they're in stable orbits. They're not coming into the inner solar system. But as the solar system orbits around the center of the galaxy, our galaxy is the Milky Way, and we are in orbit around the center of the galaxy. Our sun, our solar system, everything is in orbit around the center of the galaxy, and that orbit is not only in the plane of the galaxy. Imagine a dolphin diving up and down, coming out of the surface of the sea, descending below, rising up again. That's what the solar system is doing, and those passages through the galactic plane disturb the Oort cloud, and they send comets winging in to the inner solar system. Thank God for Jupiter. Jupiter, with its huge gravity, is the great protector of the Earth. We should all wake up every day and say, thank you, Jupiter.
Thank you, Jupiter.
This doesn't happen too often, but every now and then a comet gets past Jupiter's guard and comes in and enters the inner solar system. And the calculations show this happened about 20,000 years ago, and that comet went into an orbit that crosses the orbit of the Earth twice a year. We are still crossing the orbit of that comet twice a year, and there is still a very disturbing amount of debris within it. It's called the Taurid meteor stream. We've actually just finished our latest passage through the Taurid meteor stream. The Earth passes through the Taurid meteor stream twice a year. It takes 12 days to pass through it because the Taurid meteor stream, more numbers, is 30 million kilometers wide, and we orbit at the rate of 2.5 million kilometers a day. So 12 days to pass through it, and in the last 11,000 or so years, we've been lucky. We've been passing through this 30 million mile wide stream. We've been passing through bits where there are just filaments of small debris. But the evidence is that it is actually full of large rocky debris, including one object that may be as much as 30 kilometers in diameter, sitting in that Taurid meteor stream. So it's like, I compare it to like strapping on a blindfold and crossing a 6-lane highway and just hoping that you don't get hit by a truck. You know, that's what it comes down to, and we've been lucky so far. Actually, the most recent definite impact from the Taurid meteor stream was in 1908, and that was in Russia, in Siberia. It's called the Tunguska event. As I said, there's 2 passages through the stream, one in June, end of June, early July, and one in November. And this was at the end of June. An object not very big, about 100 meters in diameter, came out of the Taurid meteor stream, entered the atmosphere of the Earth, and actually blew up in the sky. It was an airburst about 5 kilometers above the ground. It flattened 80 million trees across 2,000 square kilometers. I'm sorry, I keep using kilometers rather than miles. 2,000 square kilometers of the Earth's surface. That's an area about the size of the city of London. If that impact had happened over an inhabited area, hundreds of thousands of people would be killed, and we would all be paying much more attention to the Taurid meteor stream today than we are presently doing.
Now, if you look at it from a geocentric point of view, the new moon on October the 16th, the sun and moon at 21 degrees of Libra, I think, will be opposite Mars in the sky and square Saturn, Uranus and Pluto, which in itself is a bit of a stinker. But for those astrologers stroke astronomers out, you look at the heliocentric chart for the 31st of October. In that chart, Mars in the sky is once again very strongly squared to Saturn, Jupiter and Pluto. On the 31st of October, Mars will be at the very start of Taurus heliocentrically, exactly squared to the degree Jupiter and Saturn. And the Sun will be conjunct Uranus heliocentrically. There are further geophysical actions taking place on the 31st of October this year. And I'm suggesting there's going to be some pretty big developments globally that are going to impact on everyone. Now, this is not an extinction event by a long way. It's going to take a lot to wipe out humanity, but it is pretty big. This is big. See, whenever I've seen anything like this, on the very rare occasion that I've seen anything like this before, it's a time where there's been 2 or 3 really big earthquakes within the space of a week, and or with volcanoes going off.
The focus on the skies, if you go back into ancient times, is so strong. This notion of as above, so below, that we are connected to the cosmos. This is something that we're tending to forget in the modern world, again, because we're so puffed up with pride. Anyway, we can't see the sky if we live in cities.
That's, I think, a big issue.
Yeah, light pollution. It's just like a haze up there. We don't see anything. So we're actually cut off from the cosmos psychologically, and that's a mistake, because we are part of this giant cosmic environment, and it affects us. And one of the way it affects us is the way that comets come into the inner solar system from time to time from deep space.
You know, when you're out at night and you look at that night sky and there's no light pollution, it's just a totally different perspective,
isn't it?
And it gives you a different sense of where you are in the universe, because we're so, and it's not necessarily our fault. It's almost like we've put up a curtain over the heavens and we can't see through the curtain because we've decided that we like light and we like traffic lights and, you know, building lights and all this jazz, and we don't realize until we're out in the woods or in the wild, until you're in the wilderness and there's no light pollution, you really don't realize what we're missing and what we're sacrificing in order to have these lights. The view of the heavens, it's psychedelic in a way, because it makes you feel like, oh my God, we're really flying through space.
whole phenomenon of the Mayan calendar, which we all heard a lot about in 2012, is another factor to take into account. The Mayan calendar, in my view, is another artifact of a lost civilization. This is that was handed down from a former people, perhaps to the Olmecs and then to the Maya who succeeded them. It's accepted, but the implications of it are not taken properly into account. Remember 21st of December 2012. There was all that fuss and nonsense about the end of the world happening then, and it didn't. But the Maya never said that. They said that the end of a great cycle happened then, which would ultimately transform the world.
Please enter your password. First unheard message.
It's me. Just wondering if you got my text. Anyway, I'm gonna go to bed pretty soon. Hope you're okay out there. Wherever you are. Night. Love you.
End of message. To delete this message, press 7. To save it as backup. Message deleted.
But what it was actually locked into, and I need to pay tribute to another researcher here. His name is John Major Jenkins. John Major Jenkins has done fantastic work on the Mayan calendar, and a decade before 2012, he was telling people, look, this is not talking about the end of the world on a specific day, on the 21st of December 2012. There's a calculation behind this, and what he showed in that calculation is that it is the position of the winter solstice sun against the background of the constellations. And what has been happening for the last 5,000 years because of precession is that the winter solstice sun, 21st of December, against the background of the constellations, has been gradually shifting towards alignment with the center of the galaxy. And that alignment happened on the 21st of December 2012, but it's not an instant, it's a window. And that window is about 80 years wide, roughly from 1960 to 2040. That was what was focused on in the Mayan calendar. A calendar that can predict eclipses of the moon 200,000 years into the future or 200,000 years into the past. Incredible, stunning accuracy, a better estimate of the length of the solar year than we use today in our modern calculations.
It doesn't even look real.
Yeah.
It doesn't even look real. Like, you see all the stars, you're like, this can't be real. How could this be up there every day and we don't see it?
Yeah.
But what we've done is create all this incredible stuff.
Yeah.
These streets and buildings and laptops and cell phones, and in doing so, we've robbed ourselves of a perspective.
Yeah, and it's weird because, you know, we have this technology that enables us to go around the whole world and even go out into outer space. But actually, we in a way, it's narrowed our focus. We focus in on the technology and its products, and we forget about the majestic, cosmic and Earth environment in which we live. How sacred it is, how beautiful it is, how meaningful it is to all of us.
And that was the image that our ancestors always had.
Always.
And that's
Night.
probably why they concentrated on it so much.
Yeah.
And the things that happened up there were evident to them. I mean, because these days, how many people see meteors? Living in an urban environment, you never see that hardly, unless it's really spectacular. I think that one of the most important things that we could do for future generations is part of our educational curriculum for young people is get them out of the cities, into nature, into the tremendous, you know, where they can actually see the sky. Because, I mean, living in Atlanta, I'll talk to people, even grown-up people, that have no clue. Have no clue. You know, they couldn't find the North Star, they couldn't find the plane of the ecliptic if their life depended on it. They're just, we've become cut off from that level, and I think that's it's important for us to keep that because our consciousness is linked to this greater domain, and we have segregated ourselves from that.
Get to grips with all that up there, as the ancients did. It gets your mind working, and it may even have been used deliberately for that purpose in ancient times, as a kind of initiation system. If you can get this, then you move on to the next level. You know, that's the kind of idea.
Well, it was a critical part of education where it's very rarely even discussed today. Astronomy is so.
Right. And look again at the ideology. So, for example, if you talk about astrology to any mainstream scientist, they're going to laugh in your face. Right. They're going to say pseudoscience, because they're so locked into this Earth-centered perspective that which convinces them that the cosmos does have no effect on us. So how can changing patterns of the stars, which zodiacal constellation is sitting behind the sun at a particular time, how can that affect us? How can when we were born affect us? I don't think we should throw that baby out with the bathwater too fast. I think we're looking at an ancient science with astrology, and I think it's been heavily diluted and prostituted in the modern world.
Debased.
But if you go back to the antiquity, you go back to the real origins of this, and you start finding some very interesting information coming out. There's a fantastic book by a guy called Rick Tarnas called Cosmos and Psyche, and he's a real mainstream but very major academic, and he's got into this, and he's shown that actually, astrology does have effects. So we should not deny our cosmic environment. That's the first thing we need to do, to connect to it, and we shouldn't close ourselves off to avenues of inquiry for ideological reasons. It's noticeable in this field of ancient history how archaeologists throw around words like pseudo-archaeologist or pseudo-scientist. That's meant to be an instant dismissal, just like climate denier. Denier. You call somebody a climate denier today, that's like saying, don't listen to anything that guy has to say.
Right.
Never listen to it again. These are ideological tools which are being used to straitjacket the human mind and to stop us thinking outside the box. And if there's ever a time where we needed to think outside the box, I would say that time is right now.
I mean, everything down here changes dramatically. But when we go out and we look at the sky, we're basically seeing the same sky that our ancestors of 20,000 years ago were looking at. And that's something to keep in mind, because there's a backdrop to all of this drama and change here below that's pretty much, for the most part, remained consistent. But within that backdrop of consistency, every once in a while, something shifts. And when it shifts out there, I think our ancestors knew that there was a direct consequence here below. And that's one of the reasons they were so obsessed with being able to track motion. All of these ancient observatories, from Stonehenge on down the line to, the mound structures here in North America.
And let's not forget Göbekli Tepe, a profoundly astronomical site.
Göbekli Tepe, yes, these were astronomical observatories, using the horizon essentially as a telescope, by which very intimate and intricate movements within that backdrop of fixed stars could actually be observed, possibly for predictive capabilities.
This is spooky and eerie, because it appears there's overwhelming evidence that the people who made Göbekli Tepe had a profound knowledge of precession, and it appears that they deliberately sent forward into time, in this time capsule, a picture of the sky in our age, and that is a staggering possibility that I investigated.
I don't understand how it's in our age.
Well, it's only at the winter solstice in our age that the sun sits over the center of the galaxy. The winter solstice, in the area that the ancient Maya called the cosmic womb. There's a dark rift in the Milky Way at that point, and they saw that as the cosmic womb. So it symbolizes a moment of rebirth. And the evidence is that they'd been tracking the movement of the sun on the winter solstice, which is also the end of the year and the rebirth of the new year. They'd been tracking it to the point where they could project forward and they could envisage the sky in our epoch today. The Maya could do that, and what I'm suggesting is that's done at Göbekli Tepe as well.
See, here's the problem. Geologists haven't been focused on catastrophism. What they've been doing, they work for the government, they work for the oil companies. They're more interested in what's down below, the natural gas, the oil and
That's
stuff.
where the money is.
There's another point. There's another point I'd like to add to that, Randall, as to why geologists are not focused on catastrophes. Geology is a science, and science, in effect, defined itself as being different from religious superstition. So the notion of the Great Flood that we find in the Bible became a very discredited notion in science, and by association with that, any suggestion of a great cataclysm in the past was seen as superstitious behavior, to be shunned completely by the squeaky clean, shiny new sciences, who must never take that into account. So any geologist who dares to propose a cataclysmic episode is up against that right away, that his colleagues don't want to go there because they're afraid that they're going to be accused of buying into Noah's flood or whatever.
To me, the evidence I'm seeing suggests that the transition from glacial to interglacial and back again is not a smooth process. In fact, it's probably highly catastrophic. Not necessarily as catastrophic as the event we're talking about 12,800 years ago, but certainly catastrophic enough that were an event of equivalent magnitude to happen today, we could maybe not cause a mass extinction, but we could certainly pull the plug on modern civilization.
We're now looking at, the estimates are now that it's 100,000 potentially Earth-destroying objects that are on Earth-crossing orbits. This is an estimate. The problem is NASA has only identified a tiny fraction of what's out there. And again, I'm not saying this because I want to spread gloom and doom. I'm saying this. I'm saying this because we have the capacity to do something about it.
Right.
It takes goodwill on the part of the human race to stop wasting money on stupid pursuits, particularly warfare, and to apply those resources to sweeping clean our cosmic environment. The technology already exists, but nobody's taking it seriously.
Well, we don't take anything seriously unless it smacks us. Like, people don't quit cigarettes until they get cancer. There's something about human beings that we don't consider the we have this idea in our head that we're eternal and we're going to live forever and everything's going to be fine. I just need a new Lexus. You know what I mean? But we have this wacky, I just need this watch that I've had my eye on, or this laptop that I want to buy. If something happened, if a massive collision hit China and it wiped out like several million people and then caused the entire Earth to go into nuclear winter and crops died and we experienced global famine, then, something like that, then we would wake up and go, all right, Russia, let's talk.
This is great. So we're actually in the 9th place, which is a good place. The age of Pisces, based on the theme of Monday. And we're about to hit the age of Aquarius, which takes us into the 8th place, which sucks, ruled by Saturn, which sucks worse. So everybody wants to get to the age of Aquarius, and it's all peace and light, love and blessings because they've listened to your damn song. Probably too much. I have no desire to end up in the age of Aquarius with Saturn running the show.
These are the steps that we need to take. We need to grow up as a species. We need to leave our childhood behind. It's interesting to speculate what would happen if we had impacts on the scale that happened 12,800 years ago. And I'm pretty sure that it would mean, if it were allowed to happen, that it would mean the end of our civilization. This civilization would go down. This is a very intensely specialized civilization. I think the just-in-time principle is that we have 2-day or 3-day food supply in our cities. You interrupt that and you have a kind of Walking Dead scenario within a week. You know, it's that bad. This civilization appears to be very strong, but in fact it's very fragile, and it could easily fall apart. And so many of us in the Western technological world actually have no survival skills whatsoever. We don't know how to survive because we depend for our survival upon the complex network of society. Who would survive a cataclysm like that would be the hunter-gatherers. People like the hunter-gatherers of the Kalahari in southern Africa, or the hunter-gatherers of the Amazon basin, you know, the meek of the world, those who are not taken into account in the world at all today. They're the ones equipped both with the knowledge and the psychological resources to deal with a situation like that and to carry the human story forward. And I just want to make sure, if I can play some part in this, I just want to make sure that the descendants of those hunter-gatherers 10,000 years in the future are not remembering faintly and vaguely a great lost civilization, a magical civilization which had the ability to go to the moon, which had the ability to, one person could speak to another person on the other side of the planet, magical powers, which was destroyed because of its own arrogance and cruelty. And that lost civilization, of course, would be us. When we're looking for a lost civilization, I think we should be looking all over the world. Plato made it clear that Atlantis wasn't just the island. It had projected its power all around the world. Indonesia is a very fruitful area for further investigation, and I did a huge research trip in Indonesia, and I saw megaliths that are just unaccounted for. The archaeology's never been done. There's a giant megalithic culture in that island. It appears to be the case that that site was put there because there was an ancient memory that this was a sacred site. The name Gunung Padang in the Indonesian language doesn't seem to mean very much. It means mountain field. But in the Sundanese language, which is the language that is spoken around Gunung Padang, what Gunung Padang means is mountain of enlightenment.
Whoa.
Suggestion that it's connected to an ancient system of knowledge. It's one of many sites that are appearing around the world now that don't fit with the mainstream picture.
So this sort of parallels some of the ideas about the old kingdom in Egypt and the ancient structures where the new structures are built on top of them. And as they dig deeper into the sand, they find different construction methods that represent an older time.
Exactly.